I never thought my own family would betray me so openly. When my parents handed my younger brother the keys to a $1.1 million beach house in Miami, they turned to me with nothing but a letter. The words were short and sharp. Find your own way. That was it. No explanation, no inheritance, no support. Just a reminder that in their eyes, I had no place in the family legacy. My brother Landon stood there with a smile, holding the deed in his hands, while my mother Diane told me, "It's better this way." My father Richard didn't even look me in the eye. In that moment, I felt erased. I was their oldest son, the one who had always done what was asked of him. But in our house, Landon had always been the favorite. He was charming, easygoing, the kind of son my parents loved to show off. I was the quiet one, the one who worked hard and never complained. They never saw me the way my grandfather did. Grandpa Walter was different. He used to tell me, "Ethan, you'll find your strength where others never bother to look." I didn't understand what he meant back then. But as I stood in that Miami living room, watching my family laugh and celebrate Landon's new life, I realized his words were the only thing keeping me from walking out the door and never coming back. What my parents didn't know was that I was willing to fight for my place in the world, even if I had to do it alone. And for years, that's exactly what I did. I picked up every night shift I could at McDonald's, cleaning floors until sunrise, and saving every dollar I earned. I thought I knew where my life was heading, until one phone call last month changed everything. A lawyer from the Bahamas reached me with a message that shook me to the core. My grandfather had left something behind, locked away, with my name on it. I packed my bag, bought a ticket I could barely afford, and flew across the ocean. When I opened that lockbox, what I found inside changed my entire life. My name is Ethan Cole, and for as long as I can remember, my life has been measured against my younger brother Landon. We grew up in Miami, just 2 years apart, but we may as well have been living in different worlds. Landon was the golden child. From the time we were kids, my parents, Diane and Richard, adored him. He had the smile, the easy charm, and the ability to make people laugh in an instant. Teachers loved him, family friends admired him, and my parents built their world around him. I was the opposite. I was quiet, more serious, and never the one who drew attention at family gatherings. I worked hard at school, but my grades didn't come as easily as Landon's did. I tried to help around the house, but my efforts rarely got noticed. My parents never said it directly, but I could feel it. Landon was the son who made them proud. I was the one they expected to manage on my own. Our childhood was full of reminders of this imbalance. When Landon turned 16, he got a brand new car, wrapped in a big red bow in the driveway. When I turned 16, I was handed the keys to my father's old sedan with a cracked windshield and a note that said, "Take care of it." Landon's high school graduation party was a catered event by the pool, with family, neighbors, and friends cheering him on. Mine was a simple dinner at a chain restaurant. Half-hearted smiles and small talk before my parents left early for a business trip. The gap only widened as we grew older. My parents paid for Landon's college tuition in full, sending him off with an allowance and credit cards in his name. I was told to apply for student loans because responsibility builds character. Landon failed classes, changed majors twice, and still graduated with their help. I worked 2 part-time jobs just to keep myself enrolled, often sleeping in the campus library between shifts. Through it all, the only person who ever looked at me differently was my grandfather, Walter Cole. Grandpa Walter lived a quieter life, splitting time between Miami and the Bahamas. He was a tall, strong man, even into his 70s, and he carried himself with a kind of wisdom that made people stop and listen. Unlike my parents, he never compared me to Landon. When I visited him, he would sit with me on the porch, hand me a glass of lemonade, and ask real questions about my life. He cared about how I was doing, not how I looked to the world. One summer afternoon, I remember sitting with him as he told me something I never forgot. "Ethan," he said, looking me straight in the eye, "the world doesn't hand out rewards fairly. Your brother might be handed everything, but don't envy him. The day will come when the things you worked for mean more than anything money can buy." At the time, I didn't know how much weight those words carried, but they stayed with me. Years later, when the moment came that divided my family for good, those words echoed in my mind. I was 25, working part-time, still trying to get ahead, when my parents gathered us in the living room. They announced that they were giving Landon the family's Miami Beach house. It was worth over $1 million, a sprawling property with ocean views, a private pool, and everything a young man could want. Landon grinned from ear to ear as they handed him the paperwork. Then they turned to me. My mother held out a folded piece of paper. It was a letter in my father's handwriting. It read, "Ethan, it's time you find your own way." No explanation, no gift, no inheritance, just that. I looked at them, waiting for someone to tell me it was a mistake, waiting for some sign that they valued me too. Instead, my father looked away as if the conversation was over. My mother said calmly, "You're strong enough to build your own life." "Landon needs the house more." "Needs it?" I asked, my voice cracking. "What about me? What have I been doing all these years? Does that mean nothing?" Diane's voice stayed cold. "You'll be fine. You always manage." I remember Landon shrugging, as if it was nothing personal. "Don't take it so hard, Ethan." "It's just a house, just a house." Those words burned into me. That house represented security, recognition, and belonging, and they had handed it to him without a second thought. That night, I drove back to my tiny apartment and sat in the dark, staring at the ceiling. My parents had made it clear that I was on my own. For the first time, I felt the full weight of being invisible in my own family. Anger and hurt filled me, but beneath it all was something stronger. Determination. If they wanted me to find my own way, then I would. I got a job at McDonald's working night shifts. It wasn't glamorous. I scrubbed grease off floors, dumped out trash, and flipped burgers until sunrise. But every paycheck I tucked away felt like one step closer to proving them wrong. I lived frugally, barely spending on anything beyond rent and food. Every dollar mattered. My life became a cycle of work and sleep, but I carried my grandfather's words with me. The things you worked for mean more than anything money can buy. I didn't have a beach house. I didn't have family support. But I had grit, and I had the stubborn belief that one day my hard work would mean something. What I didn't know then was that my grandfather had already set a plan in motion, one that would reveal itself when I least expected it. When my parents gave Landon the Miami Beach house and told me to find my own way, I thought the hardest part was the moment itself. I was wrong. The real challenge was what came after, the years that followed, where every day felt like a reminder that I had been cast aside. I kept the night job at McDonald's. The hours were brutal, but I took every shift I could get. I clocked in at 10 at night and worked until 6 in the morning. My hands smelled of grease no matter how many times I washed them. The soles of my shoes wore thin from standing on tile floors for hours. I scraped burnt fries out of baskets, wiped sticky soda spills from tables, and carried bags of trash heavier than my own body. I was exhausted, but I kept going because I had no other choice. Rent was due every month, and groceries were always just barely affordable. My paychecks were small, but I saved what I could. Each dollar became a symbol of defiance, a way of telling myself that I was not broken, even if my family wanted me to believe I was. What stung the most was not the work itself, but the silence that surrounded me. My parents rarely called, and when they did, it was only to talk about Landon. Every phone conversation was the same. "Landon just hosted a party at the house. You should see the pictures." Or, "Landon is thinking of starting a business. We're so proud of him." They never asked about me. They never asked how I was holding up, working through the night just to make ends meet. Holidays were even worse. Thanksgiving dinners where my chair sat empty because no one bothered to invite me. Christmas mornings where Landon posted pictures of his gifts online while I ate leftover fast food in my apartment. Birthdays that passed without a single message from my parents. I learned to stop expecting anything from them, but even as the loneliness grew, I refused to give up. At McDonald's, I became known as the guy who never turned down a shift. Managers leaned on me because they knew I would show up, no matter how tired I was. Some of my coworkers laughed at me, calling me the night guard, but others respected my work ethic. One night, a coworker named Carlos pulled me aside during a break. "Man, why do you do this to yourself?" he asked, biting into a burger. "You're here every night. Don't you ever think about leaving Miami and starting fresh somewhere else?" I shook my head. Leaving would mean they were right about me. I need to prove that I can make it here, on my own terms. Carlos stared at me for a long moment before nodding. "Then keep going. But don't lose yourself in the process." Those words stuck with me because deep down, I knew I was already losing pieces of myself. Nights blurred into mornings, and sleep became a luxury I could barely afford. I lived in a haze of exhaustion, my body always aching, my spirit always worn thin. Meanwhile, Landon's life looked like a constant celebration. Social media showed him throwing pool parties at the beach house, driving new cars, traveling with friends. Sometimes I would scroll through the pictures late at night during my lunch break at McDonald's, sitting in the back room with the smell of fries clinging to my uniform. The contrast was unbearable. He had been given everything, and I was breaking myself just to survive. The resentment built quietly, growing heavier with each passing year. It wasn't just anger at my parents or my brother. It was anger at the idea that I was invisible, that my effort meant nothing, that my worth was measured only in comparison to someone else. Still, there was one person who never left my thoughts, my grandfather. Even after he passed, his words stayed alive in my mind. "The things you worked for mean more than anything money can buy." At the time, it felt like empty comfort. How could my hard work ever compete with the life my brother had been handed? But something inside me refused to let go of his belief in me. The breaking point came one night after a double shift. I was mopping the floor near the counter when I saw a family walk in, a father, mother, and their teenage son. They were laughing, smiling, enjoying each other's company. The father reached over and patted his son on the back, and for a moment I felt a sharp ache in my chest. I realized then that it wasn't just money or a house I wanted. I wanted to be seen. I wanted someone to believe in me the way my grandfather once did. I finished my shift that morning and walked out into the Miami heat as the sun rose. My body felt like it was made of lead, but my mind wouldn't rest. I thought about my life, about the years I had lost working while my brother lived without consequence. I wondered if this was it, if my life was destined to be an endless cycle of struggle while everyone else moved forward. Then, just when I started to believe that nothing would ever change, the call came. A lawyer from the Bahamas, introducing himself as Marcus Hale, told me he had urgent news regarding my grandfather, Walter. He said my grandfather had left something behind and that it was in a lockbox registered under my name. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake. Why would my grandfather leave anything to me? Why not Landon, the son who had been given everything else? But Marcus was firm. "Mr. Cole, your grandfather was very specific. He wanted you to receive this. I suggest you come to the Bahamas as soon as possible." I hung up the phone and sat in silence, my heart pounding. All those years of sacrifice, all those nights of being overlooked, and suddenly a door had opened that I never expected. I didn't know what waited for me in that lockbox, but I knew one thing. I had to find out. The call from the lawyer replayed in my head for days. "Mr. Cole, your grandfather left something for you in a lockbox. He was very specific. You need to come to the Bahamas." I couldn't shake the weight of those words. For years, I had been the son my family ignored, the one they told to find his own way. Yet here was my grandfather, even in death, reaching out to me when no one else would. At first, I doubted it was real. Maybe it was some kind of mistake. Maybe the lawyer dialed the wrong number. Why would my grandfather leave something for me and not Landon, the favorite grandson who had been given everything else? But when Marcus Hale, the attorney, emailed me official documents stamped and sealed with my grandfather's name, I knew it was no scam. It was real. The problem was money. I had been working nights at McDonald's for years, saving every dollar I could, but most of my savings went to rent and bills. A ticket to the Bahamas was not cheap, and the thought of spending so much on a trip with no clear outcome terrified me. I sat in my apartment with my savings spread across the table, counting and recounting the bills. I could afford the flight, but barely. If I went, it meant pushing myself closer to the edge financially. I thought about calling my parents and telling them about the lawyer's message, but the idea made me laugh bitterly. They wouldn't care. If anything, they would find a way to talk Landon into being the rightful heir, just like they always had. This was mine. My grandfather had chosen me, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it away. So I bought the ticket. The cheapest seat I could find on a cramped flight that would take me to Nassau. The night before the trip, I barely slept. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my stomach tied in knots. Was this going to be the turning point I'd been waiting for, or was I setting myself up for more disappointment? When I boarded the plane, my nerves only grew worse. The cabin buzzed with chatter, couples heading on vacation, families with children excited about the beaches. For them, the Bahamas meant sun and relaxation. For me, it meant answers, maybe even redemption. I stared out the window as Miami disappeared below, wondering what awaited me across the ocean. The air in Nassau was different the moment I stepped off the plane. Warm, salty, alive with possibility. I carried only a backpack with a few changes of clothes. Everything I owned could fit into a suitcase, but I hadn't brought much. My focus was on one thing only: the lockbox. Marcus Hale met me at the airport. He was a tall, serious man in a gray suit, carrying a leather briefcase. He extended his hand firmly. "Mr. Cole, I'm glad you came. Your grandfather was very clear about his wishes." I nodded, my voice catching as I replied, "I just need to know why me." Marcus gave me a measured look. "I think you'll understand once you see what he left." We drove through the city in silence, passing colorful houses and the turquoise waters of the harbor. For the first time in years, I felt something stirring inside me that I hadn't felt while working night after night at McDonald's. It was hope, fragile but undeniable. At his office, Marcus led me to a small private room. On the table sat a metal lockbox, old and worn, with my name etched on a tag. My hands trembled as he placed the key in front of me. Before I opened it, I hesitated. A flood of memories came rushing back, sitting with my grandfather on his porch, hearing his voice say, "The things you worked for mean more than anything money can buy." For years, I had held on to those words, not knowing if they meant anything at all. Now, here I was, about to find out if he had left me more than just a memory. I gripped the key, slid it into the lock, and heard the click. My heart pounded in my chest. I opened the box slowly, as if the weight of my entire life depended on what was inside. At first, I saw documents neatly stacked, tied together with a ribbon. Underneath them was a brass key on a chain. I picked it up, holding it in my palm, confused. Marcus leaned forward and explained, "That key belongs to a small villa on one of the outer islands. Your grandfather purchased it years ago. The deed is in your name." I blinked in shock. "A villa? In the Bahamas?" Marcus nodded. "Yes. He wanted you to have it, not your brother, not your parents. You—" I stared at the key, my throat tightening. It didn't make sense. Why me? Why would my grandfather choose me when even my own parents had turned their backs? Marcus slid a folded letter across the table. "He wrote this for you." With shaking hands, I unfolded the paper. My grandfather's handwriting stared back at me. "Ethan, I know life has not been fair to you. I saw how hard you worked, even when no one else noticed. You never asked for anything, and that is why I trust you with this. This villa is not just property. It is a chance to build a life on your own terms, away from those who never saw your worth. I believe in you, and I always have." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. For the first time in years, I felt seen, truly seen. My parents might have given everything to Landon, but my grandfather had chosen me. I closed my eyes, gripping the letter and the key. In that moment, I realized this was more than an inheritance. It was a chance to start over, to step out of the shadow I had lived in all my life. This was my turning point. I sat there in Marcus Hale's office with the brass key in one hand and my grandfather's letter in the other. My chest felt tight, my throat raw from holding back tears. For years, I had lived in the shadow of my family's rejection, working nights while they celebrated my brother's success. Now, for the first time, I was holding something that proved my grandfather had seen me all along. The key gleamed faintly in the sunlight streaming through the window. I turned it over in my palm, still half convinced that I was dreaming. "A villa," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "He left me a villa?" Marcus leaned forward, his tone steady and reassuring. "Yes, Ethan. A beachfront villa on the island of Eleuthera. It has been maintained, though it has not been lived in for some time. It is yours. The deed is legally binding. No one can take it from you." The words hit me with more force than I expected. No one can take it from you. That was what I had always feared, that anything good in my life could be stripped away, the same way my parents had stripped away my sense of belonging. But this was different. This was mine. I asked Marcus if I could see the villa. He made a quick call, arranged transportation, and within hours I was on a small boat cutting across turquoise waters. The wind whipped against my face, carrying the smell of salt and sun. For the first time in years, I felt a thrill of anticipation instead of dread. When the boat reached the island, I saw it immediately. The villa stood on a gentle rise overlooking the ocean. It wasn't massive like the Miami beach house my parents had given Landon, but it had a quiet strength about it. White walls gleamed against the sky, and palm trees swayed in the warm breeze. The sound of waves crashing against the shore reached my ears as I climbed the hill. I gripped the key tightly as I walked to the front door. My hands shook as I slid it into the lock. With a soft turn, the door opened. The air inside carried the faint scent of cedar and sea breeze. Sunlight streamed through wide windows, illuminating wooden beams across the ceiling. The rooms were simple but elegant, furnished with care. A large desk sat near the window, and on it rested a framed photograph of my grandfather smiling with me as a boy. The sight of that photo broke something inside me. I sank into the chair, tears streaming down my face. For years, I had wondered if I mattered to anyone. Here was proof that I had always mattered to him. He hadn't just left me property. He had left me a place where I could belong. A home. I wandered through the villa, touching the walls, the furniture, the windowsills worn smooth by time. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that I had lost to years of exhaustion and neglect. In the bedroom, I found another letter in the drawer of a nightstand. It was short but powerful. "Ethan, I wanted this to be where you start again. Do not see it as a gift, but as recognition of the man you have become. You earned this by being true to yourself when others could not see your worth. Live freely, and let this place remind you that you were always enough." I pressed the letter to my chest, my body shaking. The words filled the empty spaces inside me that my parents' rejection had carved out. They gave my brother a beach house, but my grandfather gave me a life. He had seen the years I spent working in silence, the sacrifices, the loneliness, and instead of pity, he gave me respect. I walked out onto the balcony that overlooked the sea. The view stretched endlessly, the water glittering under the sun. The waves seemed to speak directly to me, reminding me that my life didn't have to be defined by my parents' choices or my brother's privilege. I could build something new here, something that belonged only to me. As I stood there, I thought back to every moment I had been overlooked, every birthday ignored, every holiday spent alone, every shift at McDonald's when I wondered if my life meant anything at all. Those moments had nearly broken me, but now they felt like proof of my strength. My parents had given Landon comfort and luxury, but they had given me resilience. My grandfather had known that. That was why he chose me. Marcus joined me on the balcony, standing quietly by my side. "Your grandfather believed in you, Ethan. He wanted this to be your chance." I nodded, still gripping the key. He gave me more than a house. He gave me back my life. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of salt and freedom. I felt lighter than I ever had before. The bitterness that had weighed me down for years began to lift. For the first time, I didn't feel like the forgotten son. I felt chosen. The climax of my story wasn't the villa itself. It was the realization that I had never been invisible to the one person who mattered. My grandfather had seen me clearly, and he had left me not just walls and a roof, but dignity and a future. Standing on the balcony of my grandfather's villa, with the waves crashing below and the sea stretching out endlessly, I felt something I had never known before. Peace. For years, my life had been nothing but survival, a constant struggle to prove myself to people who refused to see me. Now, I was holding the proof that one person had always believed in me. My grandfather had trusted me with more than property. He had trusted me with a future. I spent the first week exploring the villa and the island. The house was old, but well cared for. The locals remembered my grandfather fondly, and when they learned I was his grandson, they welcomed me warmly. For the first time, I was not seen as the son who failed to measure up. I was simply Ethan, a man beginning a new chapter. At night, I lay in the bedroom with the windows open, the sound of waves replacing the hum of traffic back in Miami. I thought about the years I had wasted, working through exhaustion at McDonald's while my family celebrated Landon's life of comfort. Anger rose in me, but it no longer consumed me the way it once did. That anger had forged something strong inside me. My brother had been handed his future. I had built mine through every sleepless night, every paycheck saved, every moment I kept going when I wanted to quit. One afternoon, as I was repairing a loose shutter, I thought back to the moment when my parents handed Landon the Miami beach house and gave me that cruel letter. "Find your own way." At the time, those words felt like punishment. Now, years later, I realized they had unknowingly given me the greatest gift. I had found my own way, and in doing so I had discovered a strength that could never be taken from me. I considered whether I should call my parents to tell them about the villa. Part of me wanted to see the look on Landon's face when he realized I had been chosen by the one person he could not impress with charm or money. Another part of me knew that sharing this would only invite conflict. My parents would argue, manipulate, and try to twist the story to make Landon the rightful heir. They would never accept that my grandfather had chosen me deliberately. So I stayed silent. The villa was mine. Not because I demanded it, but because my grandfather trusted me with it. I didn't need my parents' validation anymore. I didn't need to compete with my brother. The fight I had been waging in my heart for so many years was finally over. Instead of revenge, I chose renewal. I poured my energy into the house, fixing what needed repair, painting walls and planting flowers in the garden. Every nail I hammered and every brushstroke I painted felt like a declaration that I belonged here. I was no longer the forgotten son or the outcast. I was the man who had endured and finally found his place. As weeks passed, I started to meet more of the island community. A fisherman named Thomas invited me out on his boat and taught me how to catch a snapper. An older woman named Mariah brought me home-cooked meals and told me stories about how my grandfather had helped people quietly when they were in need. The more I learned about him, the more I realized that he had left me this villa not just as an inheritance, but as an invitation to live differently, to live with purpose, kindness, and freedom. One evening, I stood again on the balcony, watching the sun sink into the horizon. The sky turned gold and crimson, the waves reflecting fire and light. I thought of all the nights I had stood in a greasy McDonald's uniform, staring at my reflection in a stainless steel counter, wondering if my life would ever mean something. Now I understood. The meaning was not in what I was given, it was in what I had survived to reach this point. I whispered to myself, they gave Landon a house in Miami. Grandpa gave me a life. That realization was more powerful than any inheritance could ever be. Landon could keep his mansion and his shallow victories. I had something greater. I had earned resilience, and my grandfather had honored that resilience by giving me a chance to begin again. In the end, the villa became more than a home. It became a symbol. A reminder that the people who love you quietly are often the ones who see you the clearest. My parents never saw me, but my grandfather did. His gift proved that even when the world dismisses you, one person's belief can change everything. The lesson I carry now is simple. Never measure your worth by the approval of those who fail to see you. Measure it by the strength you build when no one is watching. As I looked out at the endless sea, I realized that I had finally answered the cruel message my parents gave me years ago. They told me to find my own way. And I did, not in the way they expected, but in the way I was meant to. This was my victory. And that's my story. My family gave my brother $1 million beach house and told me to find my own way. For years, I worked in silence, wondering if I had any value at all. Then, my grandfather's gift changed everything. He reminded me that sometimes the people who believe in us the most are the ones who speak the least, and that our worth is not decided by those who overlook us, but by how we rise when no one is watching. If this story spoke to you, if you felt something in Ethan's journey, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your own experiences in the comments. Let me know what part hit you the hardest, and let's start a conversation. If you found this video powerful, give it a like, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life, stories that remind us all of resilience, hope, and the power of being seen. Thank you for watching. Until next time, take care of yourself, and never stop believing in your own worth.